I don't think you can really underestimate what is going on here. This is an unprecedented moment in modern times. Just to recap, this is a war that threatens Europe. There is absolutely no doubt about that. The wrong decision or no decision could lead us to a world war, if not imminently, but certainly in years to come. And we were just trying to work this out. Have we ever seen, can either of you ever remember this many leaders, pretty much all the main European leaders, plus the head of NATO, all deciding yesterday, in 24 hours, they're jumping on a plane and they're going ahead to the White House to meet the President of America.
So
with
not
Zelensky.
For something like NATO,
not NATO
or G7,
yeah, this is a
diary
it is
change.
unprecedented, which tells you how crucial this is and how important it is that they feel that they need to be there.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, my view on this is that, when Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, that was unprecedented. I mean, that had not happened for 80 years, an invasion in Europe of this kind. So to end this war, which has been going on for 3.5 years now, there had to be a major intervention. And the only person who could have done that was obviously the President of the United States. He's the only person in the world, really, who could bring these two warring countries together. And the danger is now that, it looks like he's maybe has done a deal with Putin, and he's going to say to Zelensky, you've got to, put up or shut up. You've essentially got to sign up to the deal that I've brokered with Russia. Now, I think that puts the EU, puts us in a very difficult position.
I mean, that is unprecedented in itself, isn't it? That you're saying a US president has done a deal with Russia.
We don't know.
Potentially, or at least,
that's right.
But at least he seems to be taking that Russian
That's
side.
right.
We know that Putin wants to hold on to Crimea. We know he doesn't want Ukraine in NATO.
Sure.
These are the things that Putin is putting on his Truth social media account overnight. So he's repeating the Russian line. I mean, that in itself, think about that for a moment, that we are dealing with a president who is happy to almost legitimise Putin.
I mean,
and sell his side of the story.
It's totally extraordinary because remember, as you were saying, Kwasi, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine, but Russia has behaved badly before. They took Crimea, what was that, about 10 years ago now?
2014,
I remember when Russia invaded Georgia, when was that, about 15, 16 years ago? Something like that. They are an aggressive nation. They would threaten us, they threaten other countries in Europe. And when you look at Donald Trump's tweets or whatever the social media he now uses, it is all the Russian perspective.
Yeah.
It's that Zelensky has to do the deal. Zelensky has to come to the table. The Ukrainians have to give up. Well, why? When it's Russia who have been acting in the aggressive way. So, look, in the end, the Ukrainians have got to decide what they want to do, if they're prepared to go along with suggestions of giving up bits of their land. I mean, look, why would they want to do that? But that's the price of peace, that's their decision.
And the consequence of that, you give up some land now, they'll be thinking, well, how much more land will we have to
give? But that was where...
Does that happen with Crimea?
But what was critical in the report was the fact that they want security guarantees. Because what happened
would that look like, a security guarantee, particularly when you're dealing with someone like Putin?
So the Article 5 is that if you invade one country of NATO, then everyone else is essentially bound to come to the defence of that country. That's the
So why didn't, just explain to me, why didn't that happen with Ukraine? I know we did in practical terms of weaponry.
Well, Ukraine wasn't a member of NATO, so the Article 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah, but if Ukraine agrees to not be a member of NATO under the terms that Putin and Trump overnight on social are putting out, why would Russia agree to that? Because then Ukraine would have to be... I just wonder what a security guarantee looks like in reality when you're dealing with...
So this is essentially a brokered peace. It's a deal. and any deal will have conditions, one to whatever, however many conditions there are. And the problem is that if you have conditions, you need someone who's able to enforce them. So, and what Ukraine will be very sensitive about is the fact that Russia can say, OK, we're happy with the peace deal, but there's nothing to stop them in 5 years' time.
No, of course.
The problem is
invading, and that's why you need a security guarantee.
Of course. No, I'm just wondering what that security would be like if he's Sorry, Jonathan.
Well, the Ukrainians would be very, very anxious about that because they would say that the West, the United States, have given them these sorts of guarantees before. And unless you're part of NATO, it's not really worth the paper it's written on. And yet Russia are saying that is a red line.
But that's the discussion. That's what the critical discussion is.
What do the European leaders think they're doing right now? Why do they think that, actually, yes, we all need to get to the White House? What do they think they're going to achieve by by doing that? What do you think their aim is?
I think they've got they want to have a sense that they're going to be there in the room when the deal is signed off, because what they don't want to see is essentially Trump doing a deal with Putin and then forcing Zelensky to accept it, with all the European leaders, our NATO partners, the UK, being completely shut out.
And I suppose in a sense they think that, look, that they probably think, well, look, Putin seems to manage to get Trump in his pocket here. We need to go back and give our side of the story and remind
avoid
Trump.
a repeat of February.
And it's easy. I mean, I'm sure there's probably viewers thinking, oh, my word, talking about Ukraine and Russia again, what's that got to do with us? It's a faraway country of which we know little. But actually, it does affect Europe. Of course. It affects us not just in terms of what we pay for our gas and electricity. It impacts the future security of the European continent. Even though we're not in the EU, we are still geographically part of the European continent. We have an interest in this strategically, nationally, and in terms of defence.
I think people will see
we have to be there.
And also, Jonathan, if we do end up being part of some security guarantees, that could mean troops on the ground in Ukraine. Now, at the moment, I know they're already talking about increasing some of the funding, but we'll probably need a lot more money. Where's that going to come from? Well, it's going to affect people at home.
Well, it is.
And with this whole idea about welfare reforms might have to be put on pause.
Well, exactly. Well, I mean, we are, we're not used to this because we've had, 80 years now since the end of the war of peace and general sense of security. The world has changed. The world is completely different, and we are going to have to put more money into defence.
But the added thing, the difficulty actually is that for those 80 years, the US was prepared to underwrite, spending on defence in a way that today with Trump, they're not prepared to do
which,
that.
To an extent, I can understand.
You can see the logic, but the outcome is that people will, in Europe, will have to spend more money on defence.
Just on Trump then, and the optics, because we know that's how he...
That's how he thinks.
On one level, you maybe have to give credit to Donald Trump, whatever your views of him politically, internally or externally, in the fact that he's got this happening when others haven't. But he does play by optics, doesn't he? And so he did roll out the red carpet for Putin. There was that extraordinary moment when they were leaving, when he suddenly said, come in the beast with me. And, of course, then nobody knows what they're talking about in that car. It felt very friendly.
That's right.
Whereas this, with the European leaders and certainly Zelensky, does look, as our correspondent said earlier, like he's laid down a gauntlet. Is that part of trying to get the deal? How much do we believe that they're in the pocket of each other?
So, look, I think that it's unclear today now where he's going to go, because he could just go full Putin, Trump this is, and say, look, this is the deal that Putin and I have signed up to, you've got to do it or else. Or he could say to Russia, actually, you've got to give in on A, B or C. So we don't know which way he's going to go. I mean,
And will it affect him having all those European leaders with eyeballing
it's the biggest ego trip ever.
Oh, so
that's
he
probably another
will
reason
like
why they
that.
go.
He won't feel like that's restraining him.
No, he's right in the centre of this drama. And you've got every leader in the West coming to him.
This idea they say, don't they? He sees himself as the king, doesn't he? So everyone's coming to see the king.
And he's a reality TV guy. So, that's very much his...
He'll love the theatre of it. I think he's already put on his social media that this is the biggest time or the one occasion when all these European leaders have come to the White House. It's never happened before. And that's probably correct in as much as them all coming together in an ad hoc
way,
as you said, is unprecedented. The other thing, though, don't forget in all of this, and I think this is to the surprise of a lot of people, is that Keir Starmer has established this rapport, this sort of unlikely, unexpected friendship or closeness.
Well, I think your old friend Peter Mandelson is had a big hand in all that.
Well, whatever it is, he does seem to have got a connection, Keir Starmer, with Donald Trump. So that's going to be quite important today as well, and how Keir Starmer leverages
comes out of it. Just one other thing, the Donbass region, one of the areas where Russia isn't in full control. There's always politics beneath the threat of war, isn't there? Because that is an area rich in minerals, and we talk about how it might affect us here. Part of this is positioning, powerful and warring allies and enemies to control resources that we all need, isn't it? Whether it be gas, whether it be...
Well, this is where Trump's focus is. As a businessman, a deal maker, he thinks that... I think he probably thinks there's a price for peace, and that if he gives Putin enough resources, then everything can be resolved. The danger with that is that Putin is not the same. He's not a New York real estate guy. He's a Soviet KGB person, and a lot of his motivations will be very different than someone who's just focused on the bottom line.
We're talking about Putin. He's wanted by international courts for some very serious war crimes, and that's the one thing. And it's like, what is he saying about democracy and our values? I mean, Trump himself, if he wasn't president, probably be in a court, if not in prison by now. I mean, we're in strange times here, Jonathan.
Oh, certainly. And wasn't it? I thought one of the jaw-dropping moments of Trump meeting Putin is Putin sort of nonchalant, just shrugging his shoulders about the fact that so many people have been killed.
There was more fundamentally crazy thing. I mean, the fact that he was on a red carpet and he was smiling. Did you see he was smiling?
Yeah, applauding him.
It was pretty extraordinary.
Here's one. It's a small thing. I just saw images yesterday of Zelensky with Ursula von der Leyen, and you see him, he dresses very casually. I wonder whether he should be wearing a suit today.
Well, this is what the...
Do you know, I just think...
Will he be in the suit?
Well, I just feel like treat this quite important. Now, if you want to be on that stage, on that level with those European... And you're asking for Ukraine to be treated seriously, normally I'll be going, to wear what you like. That's what he likes to wear. But, here he is yesterday, and I just think... It's OK, but I think it's missing something. You go, well, hang on.
I suppose the thing that struck you there is it's neither combat fatigue...
No, it's somewhere in the middle.
...nor form of rest. I think combat fatigue, he made a big point.
I think you're right, because combat fatigues, you're a war leader.
I'm a war leader.
You're fighting, you're doing that.
Yeah.
And then in a suit, it's a more formal setting. But what he was wearing there was neither one thing or the other.
But that's his thing, isn't it? That's what he does now. He dresses like that, and he has dressed like that since the invasion. And I think he said he's going to carry on dressing like that until this. But I'm a great believer in the suit. I like the suit.
Like today, when you've got all the other world leaders there, you are going to stick out.
And also
You're like your mum now, aren't you? You're saying, put a tie on. It's an important day.
Who is he? The Martin Lewis of the world leaders?
I had such a stressful morning because I couldn't decide whether to put a tie on.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought I'd try and do smart casual today. And you know what? I feel like there's part of me I feel is missing.
You've just
gone back tomorrow. I'll have a tie on.
I will.
As long as you don't turn up in military garb
and
tomorrow.
the final thing I'd say about that is in the US, they tend to be a little bit more formal in those situations.
Yeah.
So for him to go to the White House...
But then will it look like he's giving in after it was such a point was made of it last February? Right, should we talk about something back at home? Concerning a lot of people, the general point of immigration, the cost of housing asylum seekers in a hotel, and the disturbances surrounding protests outside these hotels by those that are, exercised to protest for a variety of reasons. Robert Jenrick has thrown his weight by protesters outside the Bell Hotel in Epping. That's one where we've seen issues and arrests. And then Labour have come back and issued a statement saying that it was he was former Tory immigration minister under Suella Braverman at the time. He was responsible for approving the use of these asylum seekers' hotel and, in fact, increasing the use of them. So what is he thinking?
Well, he's got some brass neck, hasn't he? I mean, because he is the fella who was the immigration minister who set up these hotels. And remember, what was happening was because when he was immigration minister, his policy was to refuse to process any of the asylum applications. So people essentially got lumbered in these hotels more or less forever unless they happened to be put on a flight to Rwanda. But hardly anyone got put on a flight to Rwanda.
Hang on, so he refused to do it because they'd come over on boats, or he just refused to process anything?
Yeah, so people's applications were not getting sufficiently processed.
Right.
So people end up in this sort of logjam system of being put in these hotels with no clarity about what was going to happen next to them or so on, because his argument was, well, we can just put everybody on a flight to Rwanda, even though Rwanda was never going to work.
He won't mind being called he's got brass neck, will he?
No, brass neck. He absolutely does.
Every
senior politician wouldn't mind that. But to be fair to him, he did leave the government. That's an important fact that we're missing out. He resigned from the government.
But not about
No, he resigned about the general immigration policy and the ECHR.
His own immigration policy.
If to give him credit, I know you're...
OK, so where did he differ?
He differed in terms of the ECHR, and he thought that the broad direction of the Sunak government on this issue wasn't effective. So he would argue that, look, I resigned from the government on this issue. Now we're in opposition. The situation is worse. There are more protests. There's more anxiety about it, and it makes sense for him to go to the site of where people
well, that's
are
a fair comment. But if he signed off on these hotels, then the last thing you would think he'd be doing was complaining about them.
But he resigned.
When the Labour government argues they're trying to
if he'd stayed
deal
in
with
the
the
government,
backlog created.
if he'd stayed in the government right to the last election, then I think you'd have a point.
Okay.
But he specifically left the government about a year before the election because he protested against the government's immigration policy.
Kwasi,
he resigned.
He has decided to go and join a protest that some, not everybody, some accuse some of those people there of being racists, of being far right. But he has decided, on the whole, I'm going to be seen to be there. And he's got form. And just only last week, he put out an article where he refers to these people coming from backward countries. These are the same countries where my parents
I wouldn't use that language.
Yeah, but you know, this is the dangerous world we are in. This guy, a so-called mainstream politician, thinks he can say that. Calls them backward countries because some of them, a very tiny minority, we don't even know the figures yet, have been involved in some sexual offences.
So these are very sensitive issues, obviously.
Yeah, but he needs to be reminded, you know, the abuse we have seen in churches in this country, in the police force, in some sections of our industry here, in the media business, in politics even. Which countries are they from? Are they backward countries?
Yeah, look, so
it's really dangerous language that he comes out with, Kwasi.
Look, this is a political debate. Clearly, people are very concerned about levels of immigration. And I think his view, and I share it, is that he's got to try and make some representation. Now, some of the language he uses, I wouldn't use. I think it's probably inflammatory. But you can't duck the issue. You can't just say, OK, this thing is not an issue. Let's just walk away from it and pretend that it's not, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but you see the
Jonathan.
Well, I think you're right. You've got to be really, really careful about the language that you use. And Robert Jenrick is not a stupid man. He's a very, very clever politician. He knows what he's doing when he's using language like that. He's not using those words by mistake. Sometimes when you're in a sort of the cut and thrust of an interview, your language can be a bit clumsy, or you can get yourself in a sort of a bit of a tangle. That just happens when you're a politician in a pressured interview. It's happened to me when I was a frontline politician. When you're writing something for a national newspaper, you've thought about it, you've considered it, and he knows what he's doing in using that very inflammatory language. And it's pretty disgraceful.
It is. And Jonathan, and part of the problem with this is when it gets legitimised, this kind of language from the very top, it becomes normalised. And this links us into what we want to talk about next, which is racism in football. The Premier League has kicked off this weekend. The very first game of the season was Friday night, and Semenyo, a player, had to report racist abuse that he received from the touchline to the referee. We can't go into the details of it because a man has since been arrested. This is off the back of, we know, Jess Carter in the Women's Euro.
The game.
Yeah,
you know, between Bournemouth and Liverpool. You know, and
exactly. And you've had Jess Carter only last month saying that she's coming off social media because of racist abuse. And interesting, what we see it again in football, but as has been said by a lot of commentators over the weekend talking about this isn't football's problem. This is society's problem. So when you've got people like Jenrick using that language, what is stopping anybody shouting backward country to a footballer?
Look.
And where's he been given that power?
This has been going on. This appalling racist abuse has been going on for decades.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the issues on immigration were, there is a small section, a minority of people who turn up to these games and will hurl racist abuse.
But it's our jobs to try and reduce it.
I agree, but I don't see a causal connection between what Robert Jenrick is saying and something that's been happening for literally decades.
No, I don't think
50 years in the football stadium.
I don't think anyone's suggesting Robert Jenrick's words have led to that incident at the football game, but I think there is a general sense, and I see it in Leicester where, you know, I used to be the MP, but I still live with my kids. It does feel to me that racism is becoming more acceptable. It's like what I remember in the 80s when I was growing up. And I thought we'd moved on from that in the 90s and the 2000s. But it feels to me like with social media and this chanting at football matches and the way in which politicians are speaking with this ever coarser discourse, that things that we thought we'd moved on from are sort of coming back as being acceptable.
I agree with you about social media. I totally agree with you about that. I think people say things there that would be totally unacceptable if they were saying them in public to people. But, they're keyboard warriors, they're doing all sorts of things. I totally agree with that.
Worse, though.
And I think the social media does inflame things. But I think connecting, the behaviour of some, idiot spectator fan with what Robert Jenner is saying, I think is a bridge too far. I don't see that.
Well, I think that's not the point. That's not really the point. No one's saying that there might be a direct connection, but I think when you know that there is racism on the streets, if you are a leader, if you've got a public platform, be careful of your language.
I think you should always be careful of your language. I think that's true. I agree.
But then you go back to the point that Jonathan's making, that he didn't just say these lines in an interview off the cuff. This is a prepared language that seems to be there.
He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing.
And this is worrying.
And it's partly also, let's be honest, partly also because the Tory party are under so much pressure now from Nigel Farage and Reform.
But so are you. I mean, it's Keir Starmer who's obsessing about Nigel Farage.
Yeah, but the Tory party... So they feel like they're in this sort of battle to sort of grab attention, and you can just see them saying ever more outrageous things in order to try and knock Nigel Farage off the
he said it was a foreign
island of strangers.
Both parties, let's not
and that's
get
not
too
language
political
I would
about
have used either.
No.
Shoplifting, very quickly.
Yeah.
This is an increasing problem. I think a lot of people will be aware of this. We're now being told by some police officers that we need to have greeters on the door. What do we think
that's
of
a good idea.
Yeah.
Because I think psychologically, if you're clocking people coming in, it doesn't mean they won't steal. But I think they'll be much more self-conscious.
Apparently,
about trying
3
to
to 5 seconds is the window, Jonathan, to make eye contact.
I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, if you talk to Richard Walker from Iceland Supermarket...
Who's offering this deal, isn't he? £1 if you spot somebody off your bill or on your
I talk to him quite a lot about this. But one of the things he tells me is that because of, data protection, you're not allowed to share the photos of known shoplifters amongst the stores and say, so-and-so's walked in who's a shoplifter. That sounds to me to be absolutely bonkers. But the other thing that's now going on, which you've really got to get a grip of, you'll get, a gang walking into a shop, a supermarket, clearing the shelves of all the bottles of drink and cigarettes, going off in a van, and then selling it, literally, you can see it on, Facebook or whatever, later that day. And there's a responsibility of the social media companies, but there's also something about organised crime now and really tackling it.
So we're going to chat more about this later.
But the greeters, I think, is a good step. I mean, it's not going to stop it, but it does make people a lot more self-conscious when they come into the shop.
Yeah, it does. And it's friendly as well.
Yeah, that's right.
It's quite old school.
If you're going in just innocently, then it's
I was going to ask you about the new slang, but I fear you might not know it anyway. It's got into the Cambridge Dictionary.
Don't doubt Kwasi. He's a man on the street, is old Kwasi.
Oh, yes. Do you know what Delulu is?
No.
Deluded.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I was in a film with Delulu. She was lovely.
I can
we'll chat more.
But trad wife is a new one.
Trad wife. Yeah. Skibbity as well.
My kids go on about that.
They make me say it, which makes me fear it's something rude, because they think it's funny when they make you say it.
On TikTok.
OK.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.